Thank you for coming out to the SA town meeting. Unfortunately, the Clarity Party did drop out, so we have an unopposed party on stage with us today. That doesn't go to say that they have been elected yet. We still have to go through a voting process, which will be done next week, April 14th, 15th, and 16th. We might reduce the times, so it won't be 9 to 5, it'll be less than that. And they only really need to get one vote to be in office. So, but now I say that it's still important that each and one of you actually go out and do vote. We want to make sure that it's a show to the university that we take these elections seriously, regardless of what the outcome is. So to start out with, we're going to have the Unity Party talk about their platforms, and then myself and James will ask them a couple of questions and we'll open up to the floor. And if you're a little bit nervous about asking questions out loud, you can submit a question to Twitter. If you just hashtag, what is it? UBSA election, no S 2015. And I'll read through them and I'll ask them for you. Okay, so I'll hand it off to the Unity Party.
I'm just going to give you guys a few overarching themes of our platform, and then I'll turn it over to my running mates to talk over the rest of the platform, and then we'll turn it over to James with some questions as well as the audience. So for the Unity Party, really our overarching theme when we came up with our platform was really increasing the value of the mandatory student activity for every UB undergraduate student. So some of the ways that we came up to do that with is increased programming. So one of the things we want to implement is subsidized graduate prep for undergraduate students. The way we would do that is we've been in contact with graduate prep companies who would give us review books at a subsidized cost because we're buying them wholesale. So GMAT books, GRE, LSAT, MCAT, and because we're buying them at a subsidized price, we'll be able to sell it to undergrads at that price, and you'll be able to save on the retail cost of it as you would buying it off Amazon or at the store. Next, what we really want to do is foster the connection between UB and the city of Buffalo. There's a lot of people at this university that aren't from Buffalo and don't know all the great things that Buffalo has to offer. So we want to bring back a program that was introduced in the past called UB Tripping. So the way it works is that we would be taking buses to all around the city of Buffalo. So we'd be going to Botanical Gardens, the Birchfield Penny Art Gallery, Albright Knox. A lot of these museums have free student tickets on Fridays or different days of the week. We'd be going to the Elmwood Village, Allentown, on different Saturdays or different weekend nights. Moving on, I think another way that we could really improve the way SA functions is through different internal policy changes within the organization. So one of the things we really wanted to harp on was a fair hiring process. And I know that's something that's repeated every year, but we laid out a detailed plan of what we want to do to achieve that. One of the biggest things is each year the SA employment opportunities are only advertised kind of to the same crowd, and we really want to open that up and make sure we're advertising it to the School of Marketing, to the School of Engineering, to all the academic schools, as well as Honors College, any other the community at UB or department at UB, to make sure we're really diversifying our staff and that those staff are going to bring in different UB experiences that people from SA may or may not have. And then I won't go through it, but we've laid out specifically for chief of staff positions, for director positions, for general staff positions, who we're going to have on the hiring committee and on those interviews, and also the fact that they're all going to be asked the same questions so that we're truly ensuring a fair hiring process. Some of the other changes that we want to do internally is require a chief of staff to hold regular directors meetings so that he or she is in touch with all the directors and what's going on in their departments, and then also make sure the chief of staff is attending directors meetings for each department and staff meetings so that everyone's up to date with what's going on within SA. And another thing I think that SA struggles with, just because of the nature of the organization, given that we're all students, is holding the staff accountable, but we want to hold ourselves kind of to that standard to make sure that if the organization isn't running efficiently and if people aren't doing their jobs, that appropriate action is taken as an organization. show, we really want to focus on advocacy for the general student, kind of improving how we allow the general student to have a voice or providing them with a voice. And one of the ways we want to do that, and this wasn't something that one of us came up with, but Madeline Britt, who's a member of the Assembly, it was her idea, and we really liked it. I've been working with her through Assembly to kind of implement this, and we really hope to roll it out next year. But it would basically be a petition plugin on the SA website that allows any student to kind of advocate an idea they have about what they'd like to do, and it would require a certain amount of signatures from undergrads, and then as a student government and the body that's kind of going to be done through his Assembly will have the opportunity to respond. So if you have a student who wants to complain about how something's done or advocating for a different change, they'll post it on there. Let's say it's 200 signatures, they'll get the 200 signatures, and then Assembly will respond with like, we've taken this into account, we voted to create a task force on this, or we voted to pass a resolution, and they'll keep that student up to date. So it's kind of creating that communication for the advocacy and letting students know what we're doing in a way that will allow them to hold us accountable. Those are kind of the big points that I'm going to cover. Sean and Joe are going to cover the rest of our platform, and then I'm looking forward to any questions you guys have. So I'll turn it over to Sean.
All right. Hi, guys. I'm Sean Kazmarek. I'm the Vice Presidential Candidate for Unity. This year, I'm the Associate Coordinator for SA, so I know a lot of you guys are in clubs. You're all in a council. My special interest service and hobbies has got about 60 or so clubs in it. Just budgets, events, any SA issues that come up, I kind of help them with that. So that's my job this year. I'm just going to go over some couple advocacy and programming points, and then I'll get into a couple club things because I know that's where most of you are coming from. Just the advocacy things like even basketball hoops at Ellicott Complex or apartment shuttle schedules from apartment. If we can work with the facilities and transportation and things of that sort, just to make sure that we're doing what the students need. Like, for instance, with basketball hoops, we don't want anybody getting injured. They are pretty dangerous. We have to make sure that's all right. With the shuttle schedules, there were issues in the past year, even though the year before that they worked really well. So we want to kind of make that more efficient, make sure everybody's getting their worth out of it. With programming, there's things like the Homecoming Festival and Carnival that's really kind of increased in participation in the last couple of years, and it hasn't undergone a major increase in what's offered anytime recently. So we're looking at ideas to kind of expand that a little bit more, and even when we had the competitions during Spirit Week for clubs to join, a lot of times it doesn't allow clubs that are smaller to kind of participate. Doesn't really let them have a chance per se to kind of compete. So just kind of ideas like that and opening it up more to the student body as a whole instead, even if you're not in a club. So just kind of things like that is what we're looking at. Specifically with club policy, I know anybody here who's on an e-board, even if you're just in a club, you might have gone to a club orientation at the beginning of the year. They're very boring, even for coordinators. We don't like sitting through them. So what we want to do, instead of having one general one that all these clubs go to and you hear the same thing over and over, we want them council specific. So engineers, you'll hear things on material donations. Sports, they'll hear things on coaching or traveling through from conferences and things of that sort. International, maybe they'll hear things about kind of what they might have to do for Fiesta later in the year. Or I know FOSTA puts on things like Barrio, like big events like that is more geared towards international. So if we can kind of focus it specifically to your council, there's going to be more things and more things that you'll be able to learn from that instead of just sitting through PowerPoint slides for 6 hours. There's other things such as later in the year after club orientations, we want to have targeted workshops. So if clubs want to have a banquet later in the year, or if they need to travel to a conference or sports clubs need to go to a competition, we want to host specific workshops on kind of how to work through that. If you need a contract, if you need somebody to come in and speak, each of those we want specific targeted workshops so clubs can come in, they can kind of learn how to go through the process. So that way throughout the year we don't have 60 clubs coming in at different times asking this. It would be much more efficient if we could get everybody on the same page, everybody knew what was expected of them, everybody knew how they operated basically. It would just make things much more efficient, and it would save you guys a lot of headache when you're coming in and trying to run around and figure out what's going on. A couple final points. There's really no grievance policy policy this year per se. I know I get a lot of calls from my council coming in and saying they have issues, whether it's finance or whether it's promotion or any other part of SA. We want to have a policy where they can come in and kind of fill out a form, explain what happened, and then it would either be taken by myself or the other board members, and we look at it and kind of evaluate it, see what's going on, and then talk to the staff member, and from that we could take measures further if we thought it was necessary. So that way we can kind of get clubs involved and see if they had some bad experience, we can hopefully kind of correct that. Final point is just this year there was no club handbook, so everything that you guys have done is basically just on the coordinator's or vice president's word, essentially. If we do have to go back to a specific policy, it actually goes back to 2 years. So when new budgets come out August 1st, we want to be able to have that handbook out for you guys so you guys know throughout the year what you're expected for requirements, what you're expected for rollover, what you're expected for budgets and things like that. So that's kind of what I have for club points. I know Joe will get into a couple more things with that, some different things. So with that, I will give it to Joe Pace.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Joe Pace. I'm currently the engineering coordinator for SA. This is my second year doing that. Starting out from a club perspective, we want to redesign the rollover policy for 2015. So this would be all work that's done over the summer to calculate your rollover, for this coming fall. For those of you who were at the endorsements on Monday, you've heard all of it already. So I'll just give a quick recap of it. Pretty much what it entails is, rather than needing to fundraise 50% of your budget, you can have a percentage taken off what you need to fundraise based on your performance throughout the year if you exceed your other club requirements. So by doing extra SA participation, club events, and community service, you can actually be required to fundraise less than the previously required 50%. I can explain that more in the Q&A if it's not clear and needs a little more fleshing out. Additionally, we want to create a budgetary conference line. So if clubs want to bring a national or regional conference to UB, we want to help you guys do that. And obviously, hosting conferences is a really big expense that is not accounted for when you get your budget. So we want to have something in place that will allow you, to come to us, ask for money, explain what you're doing, and then we'll help you host a conference, because these things are really good for your club and also for UB as a whole. Additionally, we're going to continue to explore SAFE program alternatives. For those of you in clubs, you obviously know and love SAFE, so unfortunately, it's not going to be supported in the future by the company that currently operates it. So the current e-board is looking into different programs that can be adopted to basically perform the function that SAFE does for putting in POs, financial management, and that kind of thing. So we're going to continue to pursue that and try to find the best option that gives you the services that it needs to. I know I've used SAFE a lot over the last 2 years, for better or for worse. So I feel like we're all pretty well suited to sort of be able to give a guiding hand to that process and find something that really works. In terms of advocacy, the kind of last point is looking for ways to provide more food options for people with dietary restrictions. Obviously, there's a lot of people who need to eat kosher or halal or lactose intolerant or whatever. So we kind of like to advocate with campus dining to make things like that a little more easily accessible. I currently sit on the FSA executive board, they're the ones who run campus dining. So even if it's not me personally, I think we have relationships with that board already, and Jeff Brady, who's the executive of that, and I think that that's something that would be good to really appeal to more students. In terms of programming, we want to continue doing 3 concerts, so we can really please as much of the student population as we can by switching up the genres and try to sort of hit as many bases as we can, and then also do genre polling over the summer. I know it was done this past summer, and I think that's something we want to continue and even try to get more student feedback on. Obviously, you are the guys paying the student activity fee, so we'd like to take your opinions into account when finding artists and planning these large concerts. Those are the points that I had. I guess we will turn it over to James or Matt to ask some starting questions.
All right, so me and James are going to ask a couple of questions first, and we'll let the crowd ask questions. My question is to Sean, as far far as the clubs go. A big thing is there's really no standard when it comes to certain club requirements, so coordinators generally have their own decision whether or not they can choose what counts as what, and it turns into a real gray area when it comes to certain events. Some people have disagree whether or not they should count, or some people agree. And the biggest thing is that it leads to a lot of like disorganized stuff as far as what does count and what doesn't, and it's also breeds this sort of continuation of like, oh, well, that happened in the past, so it should happen again this year. And I know that the coordinator autonomy is a very important aspect to the coordinators, but what would you think would be a good way to try to consolidate a way where we can have a universal system that allows us to know what exactly counts as what and what doesn't count at all?
I mean, the first thing is we do need. I mean, the first thing is having a club handbook because we don't have one this year. So just at least to set out the basic requirements, the 2222s that you guys have to meet if you're in a club every semester. So at least having a good base for that. The second budgets come out August 1st would be much, I guess, beneficial to you guys. But also, I know for me and Joe too, because we're this year and then Monaco was one last year. A lot of the disconnect comes when we have emails either sent out through kind of club services or the vice president who say one thing, and we, as coordinators, weren't told beforehand what is going to come for what. So, for instance, there might be an open house for community day. I know that's come up before recently, where I was actually not told what it would count as, and then we had an email come out, and it kind of created a disconnect. So, next year, as vice president, what I would be doing would kind of be in constant contact with the coordinators. They do deserve the autonomy. They do know their clubs better than I would. There's way too many clubs, and I think the coordinators are best suited to work with them. But it would be more in the role of working with them and being in constant contact, just kind of letting them know what events are coming up and saying, what do you guys think of counting for this? What about this? It wouldn't be me dictating to them what I wanted to count as. It would still be left up to them essentially, but I would rather have it be an inclusive process, rather have them be aware of what's going on, because I'm sure Joe could speak to this too. There have been many times this year where we're not exactly aware of what's going on, and that's definitely something that needs to change if we want clubs to kind of be all on the same page with requirements, especially when it comes to budget time.
I have another question for Sean again. Sorry. This comes down to club constitutions. The biggest thing that is happening is that a lot of clubs don't understand that they're supposed to be following their constitutions, and that a lot of times when they do their elections, they don't follow the rules in their constitution at all. And another big problem is that a lot of the constitutions are still from the 70s. So, you know, what may have worked in the 70s and 80s doesn't necessarily work in 2015. What is your plan to try to get clubs, and motivate clubs to actually go and look at their constitutions, make updates to them, and make them more modern, so to speak?
I know one thing that was supposed to happen over summer, or was trying to get done. I think Matt, you were part of it as well. When Evan came into office this past year as vice president, they were trying to push for a lot of the older clubs to kind of modernize their constitutions. They pretty much came up with a template of what a good constitution should look like that would be able to be tweaked for, I guess, the club's specific purposes. So something like that would benefit clubs, would benefit the organization, at least to get constitutions updated, because there are a lot of constitutions that, while they were in line with SUNY or SA policy in the 1970s or 80s, they're not in line with it now. So there are very specific requirements that clubs need to have in their constitutions that just aren't there. So over the summer, if we could do something similar to what was started last year, come up with a template, kind of look over every club's constitution, just kind of let them know that they're going to have to edit it, there are things out of date, and you just kind of have to tell them, like, look, you're out of date, you cannot continue operating as a club like this, like, it needs to change. So I think a process like that was started last year, if we could kind of continue that and actually work on that over summer instead of putting it on the back burner, I think would definitely work to get everything modernized in regards to constitutions.
Okay, so my first question I'm going to direct towards Monaco, and as I'm sure you're well aware, as SA president, you're given the opportunity to serve on a bunch of different boards and committees on campus, such as Subboard 1 Incorporated Board of Directors, the Coalition of Advocacy and Leadership, better known as COLE, which is made up of leaders from all these 7 student governments on campus, as well as the SUNY Student Assembly. So how do you plan on working within these bodies to benefit students on campus?
James, just to specify, do you mean the appointments specifically, or regardless of appointments, how we're going to function within those boards?
It can be including appointments, but
Okay.
you'll be serving on
Right.
most of them, I assume. So,
So as far as appointments are concerned, I know in the past, kind of appointments to subboard and FSA and different boards like that, it's kind of been used as something for the executive board to give their friends or people that they know as maybe as a consolation prize for not getting a job. But I think that's extremely dangerous and would in no way advocate for that. I think whoever I appoint to each of those boards will make sense. So with subboard, I would want someone who has experience and understands what the function of subboard is and has worked either through SA Finance or knows what SA Finance consists of and knows the relationship between SA and subboard and what we need them for as an organization and is kind of aware of the services they provide us, because I think that in order to be an effective appointment on any of those boards, you have to have the requisite knowledge of what that organization does, and I think that's the first step in making sure that all your appointments and how your presence and representation on those boards is effective. I think the second step to that is communication. So in COLE or in subboard, it's not just us, it's all of the other student governments. And I think as students, obviously we're advocating for the undergrad students and that's who we represent, but there's a lot of issues that are universal among all students. And when we're talking about policy change or advocating for anything like that, I think it's important to keep open communication with the other governments so that we can be sure that we're all on the same page and keeping each other in contact, and we'll have a much more effective time on any of those boards and a better experience for all students at UB.
Hello? Okay, thank you, Vanessa, for turning that off. So, another thing that you're going to encounter, I've encountered it this year, I think every single SAE board has encountered it probably since the beginning of SA starting to hold large-scale concerts such as the Fall Fest and Spring Fest, is you can't satisfy everyone, but I think there are ways that you can probably maximize student satisfaction. So my question, this could be for any of you, is how do you plan on, number one, maximizing the number of satisfied students, and how are you going to go about explaining how you reach that process? Because I think that's another important aspect of students understanding how you come to those decisions.
I can start this answer off, and then if John or Joe have anything to add, we can go from there. I think we've kind of addressed this in our platform in that we have decided we want to continue with the 3 larger scale concerts, because I think that versus Fall Fest, Spring Fest, and a small concert advocates to the student body as a whole a lot better, because then you can focus on 3 distinct genres like how it was this year. And I think genre polling is the other way we plan to get student input. It's hard to get actual lineups as we've known from the past, but I think if we start the genre polls early for Fall Fest going into summer and then throughout the fall semester, I think it's the best way to kind of get student impact, engage from there. And I think as far as keeping students informed about the process, I think is just keeping open communication. So releasing our results from the genre polling fest and explaining that, you know, this genre works out better for this time of year or for this venue or the artists that we were able to get, and kind of working with the entertainment director on that and making sure that we're effectively kind of pushing our message to the student body.
Thank you. My next question is similar regarding explaining how you're reaching the decisions you are, but there are going to be times where you make some large-scale financial decisions. We've received a decent amount of criticism this year for are spending $9,000 building a new SA website. It's been a hot topic with Spectrum and students around campus. Whether I plan on having you guys work with me throughout the rest of the year as we do explore new avenues for a new safe system. These things are not inexpensive purchases that we make. So whether it's you guys working with me this year and something is signed off on, whether we're just exploring this year and it comes to you guys next year, how are you going to go about informing students how you're reaching these financial decisions and why it's important why you guys felt it was important to spend their money in that way?
I guess for me, can people hear me without the mic? No. No, okay. I hate microphones. So when you're spending money, obviously it's students' money, and you need to keep in mind that you're really trying to give the greatest benefit to the students. So it is crucial to have a really thorough decision-making process and make your whole process very open and very easily understood by the people who are funding your organization. That being said, between all the undergrad students here, the budget of the Student Association nears $4 million. So that being said, that is a lot of money that is being transferred in and out of club accounts, as well as the the lines that are managed by the executive board or whatever. So these big ticket items, like I mentioned, such as the new safe system, it's really imperative that you get a good product. So it's easy to see a large number and have sticker shock. I know when you see $9,000, that seems like a lot of money. But when you think about the flow of information that's going both ways through the website, it's you don't want to basically jump to conclusions. So, when looking into things like the new safe alternative, you need to keep in mind that there's accounting software, first of all, is expensive. Additionally, you need to keep in mind that it's going to be interfacing with KVS, which is the software that Subboard uses. So there really are a lot of odds and ends sort of taken into account. And I think that if you don't do a good job explaining what you're doing, it'll be easy for the average student to not be fully aware and really sort of not be well informed. And it's really easy to come to a conclusion that the government's being wasteful or SA is not doing its due diligence, when in reality people are trying to work hard to put out the best product they can. So I think at the end of the day it breaks down to making sure that you cover all your bases. You don't make decisions too hastily. Obviously, being in office for only 1 year, you try to do the best that you can, but you do need to make decisions. So it's important that you find a good balance between productivity and also communication. Does anyone want to add anything? Did I answer your question? Yeah.
All right. I just had one more question before we can open it up to some questions from the audience for you guys. This might be jumping ahead a little bit, but I think it's safe to say that you guys are most likely going to win this election and be hiring staff for next year. So the first position that's almost always hired on the SA staff is the chief of staff. There may be some people here today who are interested in applying, so I would like to know what qualities you guys are looking for in a good chief of staff for next year.
I think the skills that we're looking for is someone who can work effectively with people, not only on a personal one-on-one level that can ensure that everyone on our staff is satisfied and productive, but also as an organization. I know I want someone who's thinking about what they can do, making recommendations to the e-board about how they can improve the functionality of the organization, how they can continue to push SA forward. I think some of that obviously requires the vision of what they want. I want them to be someone who believes in our platform and our vision and is a team member with us, and also someone who is good with dealing with people and has the skills. A lot of times the chief of staff has a hard job along with the e-board, and if there needs to be staff cuts or something which is not always easy to do in a student organization, but I want to be someone who's comfortable doing that, but also comfortable leading meetings and leading the staff as a whole.
Can you talk more about your advocacy for providing more food options on campus and whether or not you think it is feasible to complete those actions during your term?
So as I mentioned, I'm on the FSA board. I don't know if I'll be doing that again next year. But while on the board, you do have the ability to you can create smaller committees within the executive board, and you are working directly with the administration of Campus Dining and Shops. So probably the way the process would work is you would bring the issue to the board at probably one of the first board meetings of the year in the fall, and then you'd form some kind of committee. You'd look into what are students looking for, what do we have, and what do we need, because those are really the important questions that are being asked when you're looking at this issue. And from there, the study will continue into feasibility. So how much will it cost to bring in more options, and what is going to be the return on that? Obviously, if it's a huge loss, it'll be hard to convince the board that that's a thing to do, because they are slightly a separate entity. So making money is still kind of important for them. However, with such a large consumer base being, all the students, faculty, et cetera, from UB, it seems from kind of a qualitative standpoint that there would be a demand for that kind of thing. So I know every time that I walk through, through NSC, that kind of area, and walk past the Kosher Deli, there's always a lot of people there. And that's kind of one of the more niche locations on campus that offers things like that. So I guess that probably wasn't a super great answer to your question. I believe that it is sort of feasible, but it would be a little bit of a process that would probably extend at least more than halfway through fall semester before you would really get anywhere with it. So realistically, maybe by spring semester something could be done, but obviously it would be kind of a big decision, and also there'd be a lot of other costs, not to mention overhead from if you need to bring in new equipment, new machines. I know certain dietary restrictions are more kind of restrictive than others, so there is kind of a lot of odds and ends to be taken into account. So it's not going to be super easy or a quick fix, if you will. Like, the basketball courts could theoretically be, a couple meetings long, boom, you're done. This is maybe a little more long term, but I believe that it is doable. To what extent, obviously I can't say to you right now.
Do you have any options that people are going to push for this, like vegan, kosher, or vegetarian options more?
That's something that would probably be determined by the committee when they investigate it further, because you need to have a little bit of student input, obviously. Some kind of focus group, to target sort of what's going on. Maybe even talking to groups on campus who represent those people. So going to the groups, and figuring out religious restrictions, or I think there is someone trying to start up a vegan club. Okay, look at that, they are a thing. So those would be good groups to talk to. You can really figure out what students want, and if there's any way you can make those make those dietary restrictions overlap with one another, because that's when you really find something successful. I know that they are looking to expand BERTS and do more with it, so that is a possible expansion option for something that does have those opportunities.
So my question was kind of more about the money aspect. It seems like you guys have a lot of really good ideas and a lot of really great programs that you want to implement. So I'm just kind of wondering where the money is going to get shifted around from, because I know that for clubs it's really important for us that we kind of maintain the budgets that we have, and we're looking also for budget increases and to kind of grow our clubs. So I was kind of wondering how that's going to affect the club budget process, and how you think you're going to kind of take funds from other places, or is it going to have to be like a activities fee increase? Where is that going to come from?
That's a great question. Can you guys hear me through this microphone? So one of the things that's really exciting for us, and the reason we were able to put platform ideas that are kind of new and stand behind them, is that when this past referendum happened in the fall, there was an increase in the mandatory student activity fee. So it was a $6 increase per undergraduate student, and that increases our budget significantly. So some of the new things that we want to do in terms of the conference line and the UB tripping and the increased programming to the Western New York and subsidized graduate, that's where we kind of want the bulk of that money to come from. So club budgets have already been determined, they're going to stand as is, and there's no plan to take any sort of money out of club budgets for any of the group initiatives.
That being said, some of the increase is also going into things like minimum wage increases. As you know, New York State's minimum wage is increasing on December 31st. So some of the increase has kind of been allotted between, entertainment, because obviously, prices go up for both production as well as talent and everything else. So kind of the increase was divided between clubs, entertainment, as well as some internal SA stuff. So most of these new ideas will come out of general programming. Obviously, the three of us have all been in clubs and been very active in clubs. We've all been coordinators. So we're not by any means, looking to slash club budgets or, find ways we can take money. Obviously, we're all very pro club and we like to see what the clubs do. So just to clear up any possible miscommunication.
The one thing too, just to kind of, I guess, follow up to their points, Joe and I this past year, and Minaho the year before, all three of us were on the SA Finance Committee, so we did form the budget, we know how it works. So just seeing that, we know kind of how the process works, and we know what is feasible and what isn't. And this year with the increase in the fee, Joe and I kind of saw that, and it kind of helped us when we were forming the budget know that, well, this is kind of still available, we might be able to do this. So me and Joe have seen him, and Nahil also has been on the committee before. So as for what we can do with the budget, we've all been in that process, and we know how it works.
How do you plan to appease students who think the mandatory student activity fee is useless?
I mean, if a student thinks mandatory activity fee is useless, the thing is there's a referendum every 2 years. There was one just this past year. Students went and voted, and it was voted in favor of. And that's a SUNY guideline. It's mandated that we have student vote on it. So being that there was a vote, it's not something we can change. We can't increase it. We can't decrease it. It is voted on by the students, so that's kind of what we have to go with what the students say, and they voted to increase it.
Kind of just to follow up on that, Sean is right in that it is voted on every year. What we really can do as an SA executive board is increase the value that the mandatory student activity pays for every year. So I think if we increase programming to the general student, for a lot of you that are here from clubs, all of you know how big of an impact your club has had on your UB experience, and that's why you're here. That's why you're willing to be here on a Wednesday evening. So I think that what we have to do is increase the value that it provides to a student and to clubs. So make sure we're continuing to fund our clubs to the best of their ability. Make sure we're providing students programming, because I think if they see the direct benefit that their student activity fee provides them, then they're not going to question that, and they're going to see why it exists. It's to enhance their own university experience.
I take it from your question, are you someone who does not view the mandatory student activity fee favorably? And I guess the follow-up would be, is there something you think we should be doing that we're not doing?
Yeah, I personally don't really like the student activity fee because I find it mandatory and we don't really get a choice as students. And even as a 2-year vote every year that goes, it's not really advertised well. People don't really know about it, so I don't really think it's a fair process either. So I just want to know how do you guys plan to, I guess, increase the value, and what specific processes you guys are looking at to increase that?
And we kind of went through our initial platform points. Also, if you have like a smartphone, you can go on our Facebook page and you can view it again. We also have little handouts down here with kind of just some of the centralized points. And kind of all of those things are designed to both streamline the organization, to minimize overhead costs, and really make it so we're doing our best to not be spending money on things that students don't think is useful, as well as really expanding our programming to appeal to a broader base of students, whether that's having different genres of concerts, doing things like the UB Tripping where we bring students to Buffalo, making the hoops better in Ellicott, really sort of try to broaden our reach around campus in the hope that each student will find something that we do that they find useful, that's benefited them and enhanced their experience.
That's it, thank you.
Sean, you mentioned grievances earlier. What can you say you would do to help restructure or bring back the student-wide judiciary?
The student-wide judiciary really isn't under the purview of SA because they're a separate entity. It's not like we can install reforms within SWJ that's gonna change anything. So, being a separate entity, there's not much we can really provide in terms of support or financial support or things of that sort. No,
Just to clarify, Jeff, for my understanding, they're definitely still in existence and have a chief justice and are supposed to be fully functioning. Have you heard otherwise, or?
I haven't heard any.
Oh, okay. I think that this year, I think like any student organization, a lot of it depends on leadership. So I think the reason this year it may not have been as active in the past, it could be dependent on who's a justice there. I haven't met with the chief justice at any point throughout this year. But I think any sort of internal, as far as our platform relates to it, grievance policy, we're kind of talking internally within SA. And just to, anytime a club has a bad experience, to make sure we kind of work it out through the club and make sure that we are working to fix where we failed the club in our obligations. I don't know if that answers your question.
Kind of, yeah.
Just to go off what they were saying, I tried getting in contact with the Chief Justice and they don't respond back to me, even though we need them for the SA election. So it's pretty much based on what they do.
Questions?
Hey guys, so recently SUNY Albany voted down their student mandatory activity fee, and so now their SA basically is only surviving off of their reserve funds. And one of the major things that they're trying to get money off of is by selling this land that they own. I don't know why their SA owns about 100 acres of land in the Adirondacks. And yeah, it's a real thing, it's a real thing. But a few administrators have talked about how RSA should purchase that land from them. So I just want to know if you guys have considered this, if it's something that you're looking into, or you know how you feel about that. You know.
I'm gonna give this a really nebulous answer. How's that?
Yeah, go for it.
So I talked to RP, one of the SA Pro staff, just over spring break as I was in the office, as I was for a lot of spring break. And he mentioned this, and we sort of chatted about it, and it seems like kind of a cool thing. A couple fundamental issues is that it's pretty far away, which is super inconvenient when you think about the amount of gas and time that would be spent by students trying to get to this place. So if you want to go there for like spring break, you're going to burn a lot of time just traveling. Additionally, the off-the-top cost, I honestly have no idea what it is, so I can't speak to that.
It's around $120,000, I believe they said.
It's actually cheaper than I would have expected.
I don't know how much land costs. So
Yeah.
don't purchase
I'm not a real estate agent, obviously. But I guess it was briefly mentioned, but we're gonna stay probably far away from that until any actual research can be done.
Thank you, Joe.
I think you should buy it.
If staff or an administration filed a complaint on a club, what would you do to go about that situation? Complaint as in request to terminate the club due to issues, probably.
Like,
Yeah, UB
so
staff.
like professional staff.
Yeah.
Do you mean SA Pro staff or like university administration?
University administration and or I don't think it really matters.
Do you mean like if a club comes to us and asks
No,
that
the
it's
club doesn't. The university does.
If the university says that a club should be derecognized, how would you?
Okay.
We've all served on Senate, so I can give you a little bit, and then Sean and Joe can add anything. So there's no clear-cut answer for your question. It would have to depend on the situation. Within the SA Constitution, we have a policy for club derecognition, and it specifies what you have to do as a club in terms of things that could qualify you to get derecognized, and that goes through an investigative committee and through Senate. I know it's happened a couple years ago. But it would really have to depend on the situation. It would have to depend on whether there was illegal activity, what was done, what the reason was. So I can't really say what actions particular would be taken. If a club did need to be put up for derecognition, to be done with the coordinator and through SA Senate. But in terms of if there was an unnecessary request to terminate a club or something that a club didn't violate any sort of policy, I think as an organization, SA believes in its clubs and stands behind it as long as everything was done properly, correctly, and legally.
On my part, I did earlier in the year have to derecognize one club, and just kind of personally in my council, towards the end of the year, there are clubs that will have to be considered and looked into for that sort of thing. But from that end, it's just more because their enactment didn't meet what SA told them to do. If they met everything SA has required, if they followed the SUNY guidelines, if they've done everything that they need to do to maintain a club and maintain their membership, there's really no reason to derecognize them. If the administration of the university says you need to derecognize this club, the only way we really could do that, or would do that, is if they did break some legal rules, some, I guess, SA regulation. But other than that, there's really nothing we could do, and I don't think there's anything we'd want to do, because if a club's doing everything they can, why would we derecognize them?
Speaking as someone who has worked both with SA and student life, I think it's safe to say that I've called this building my home for pretty much the last 3 years straight. That being said, the student union is clearly in a very sad state. Our microphones don't work in our theater, which sucks and is super awkward. I apologize for that. But there have been a lot of general complaints about the status of the student union, and Student Life has been working on some plans to update and make some renovations here and there. Do you see SA becoming involved in any way in updating the student union, whether that be the social hall, which LASA uses every week, the places that we all eat at? Yeah, does that make sense?
First off, thank you for fixing the mic situation. I think, I think you guys went on what you said. For a lot of the clubs, obviously, the student union as a whole is where our offices are, where we tend to meet, where we hold all of our functions, if not weekly meetings. So it's a big part of kind of where SA functions. I can't give you a specific answer in whether or not we'd get involved. We'd have to have conversations with Tom and Carrie, find out what it is that the student union needs the most, and if it's something that directly affects SA and would directly affect the functionality of our clubs, it's definitely something we'd be willing to look into and have those specific conversations about monetary amounts and what it would be going to purchase.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. The first, no, wait, really? There might be like a time pause between the questions then. Okay, so how do you guys value consistency for clubs throughout the years?
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is, like for example, clubs get money, and that money typically doesn't decrease if the club meets all of their all the requirements. And typically clubs go for increases and look to increase their budget for the following year. But the thing is, the money comes from the same pool, and as the SA is increasing with new clubs who are going to be looking for budgets in the future, you guys are not going to have as much money to give to those new clubs if you guys are increasing the budget of the clubs that are already present. So how will you look to kind of like fund those new clubs, pretty much is what I'm asking.
Well, anybody who's been in a club, who's kind of started a club knows, if you start a club, that club actually doesn't get a budget for the first year, and that's kind of to make sure that they can survive without being kind of backed by SA, that they can survive on their own if need be. As for clubs increasing, like me personally being SISH coordinator, I think I've had 9 or 10 new clubs signed off on this year. But, I mean, a lot of it is going to help, as specific to this year, is that we do have that increase in the budget, that Joe, Niall, and myself have all been on finance. We know how club budgets are formed and things of that sort. But a lot of it comes down to making sure clubs actually meet requirements. I can probably pretty surely say there are a couple clubs, at least within my council, I can't speak for Joe or any other coordinator, that actually aren't meeting requirements. And when I mentioned earlier about making sure these clubs kind of get investigated to be recognized, that's what we have to do. We have to make sure as coordinators, or even in my position next year as vice president, that these clubs aren't just existing without doing anything and wasting SA resources. We do have a rule that says that you can't duplicate services for clubs. That's in there partially because we can't have a similar purpose and be wasting money on 2 clubs doing the same exact thing. But in addition to that, again, it's really going to come down to making sure clubs are meeting requirements and kind of pushing those out that aren't, I guess, meeting requirements, that don't have a membership, that aren't putting anything through their budget at all. That's definitely one part of it. And if that's not the case, if all clubs do stay, then it is going to come down to us and finance committee specifically to make sure that we are being responsible with all of our budget with money. But that's something we have to deal with when we see that come up. Joe.
You talked about a lot of the ways that you are going to keep communication between a lot of the students in clubs and a lot of the different faculty members and everything, and that's kind of targeting people who are already affiliated or know a lot about the SA Association or the Student Association. Do you plan on kind of advertising to the larger student body? Because I know a lot of students that go here and they have no idea what the SA is and what it does. So yeah.
Definitely is the short answer, but I think that, when I was presenting the platform, I touched upon, even for staff, kind of pushing the word out there beyond the people who kind of around the union and know SA or in clubs, and really get a diverse staff that's had different UB experiences from other organizations that can kind of work to help us build those connections so we continue to be a big part of this university. And I think we definitely advocate for advertising to the larger student body, especially as we plan on increasing programming and keeping some of the existing one. I think that the marketing department as a whole within the SA needs to improve in terms of making sure that we're really pushing events. Because if we have events that are great, that's wonderful, but if students don't go to them, it's not really serving its purpose. So I think who we hire in the marketing department really to ensure that they're going to do their job in terms of pushing it out to the general student, whether it's morning flyering or making sure we have active social networks or we have a presence in the union lobby and around the school. Does that answer your question?
So I don't think so it would be too soon thing, but congratulations, Unity. And my question goes to Sean, where he mentioned about having a specific guideline handbook for the clubs where they know what are the requirements, what are the rules that they have to follow, kind of a thing. My one concern is, and I want to ask this, having personally seen this happen in some of the clubs that I'm part of, that sometimes rules are bent by the e-board taking advantage of their position over the members of the club to influence them into doing something or not doing something, which is not exactly illegal, but also not exactly ethical. So is there any benchmark where you would be able to check what kind of things are happening or a stricter control over the clubs?
I mean, the club handbook isn't relating more or less to clubs in relation to SA, the requirements that they have to meet, what they have to do for rollover, and things of that sort, financial policies, recognitions, Senate grants, co-sponsorship, SBI, things of that sort are kind of all included in the club handbook. As for an issue like that, that would be something, if there were members of the club that felt like that, there's not one specific process that's in place, but what would usually happen is, if there were e-board members like that, the club should look into either kind of impeaching those e-board members, or whichever coordinator, what council you belong to, talk to that coordinator, and then they can kind of work it out. They can speak to SA can then kind of mediate between it, but there's really no process other than the impeachment process in a club constitution that says what can be done to kind of stop or get rid of e-board members who are taking advantage of their position.
Thank you.
Questions?
So I think we can all agree that it's kind of unfortunate. I mean, it's fortunate for you guys, but kind of unfortunate for the student association that there isn't an election, that you don't have the democratic process of being able to choose. So my question is kind of for all of you is how do you plan on making sure this doesn't happen next year? That this time next year we're having a debate and not a coronation.
Well, first of all, you can't force people to run. Just is like a kind of a baseline thing. However, I think that there would be students who are interested, and the important thing to do is to advertise that, you know, the student association is looking to, you know, elect people, hire people, etc. And really you want to generate, you know, you want to generate people in your organization who, you know, both want to ascend to higher levels of leadership, as well as bring in people from outside the organization who can kind of infuse new life and new ideas. So I believe it's going to be some kind of blend between the two of both, you know, experience as well as new things, in order to, you know, properly advertise and make sure people know, hey, there's stuff going on, you know, and really also encourage people to run who want to affect change and who want to do it for the right reasons.
Hi, I wanted to say something positive and tell you guys that I think you sound like a great board, and I think you guys are going to do a good job. I'm not going to bombard you with a question, although some of them have been good, and just wanted to lighten the mood a little bit. You guys are doing a good job. I vote for you with or without a, you know, opposing party.
Nice, Katie, nice. Sash for the win.
So my question is for Joe. As treasurer next year, I know you guys are looking into new safe alternatives and whatnot, and as always, there's always going to be new club e-board members who are probably not going to be able to either use safe or whatever new system you have. And I know that it's been a problem this year and all the years past where there's always problems with clubs being reimbursed or not putting in POs correctly, and a lot of clubs express their frustration negatively to that because they feel like they lost a lot of money, and some in the past treasurers have not always been willing to work with clubs. And how will you first make sure that these type of mistakes don't occur, and when they eventually do, how will you deal with them?
I believe the first stage to kind of alleviating all of the anger that seems to center around SA Finance, and believe me, I know it's significant. You know, I've intimately worked with them for the last 2 years. So the first thing is going to be education, and then making sure that clubs are aware of how to perform their duties, you know, to the correct extent. I know that a lot of the issues that I have seen that stem from, you know, just from my council, obviously that's what I have the most experience in, they just didn't know what they were supposed to do. And part of that will come into play at the orientations at the beginning of the year in trying to educate people on, you know, let's say you have situation A, this is what you will do. If you want a reimbursement, this is what you do. These are situations in which reimbursements are either applicable or not applicable. So that's kind of going to be the first stage. And then the second stage is going to kind of revolve around the staff that works in finance. So, you know, hiring bookkeepers and an assistant treasurer who is both well-versed in the policy. So, I know how frustrating it is for me if I go in finance and ask someone a question and they don't know the answer. Like, why are you here if you can't tell me what I'm here to learn? Like, it just seems silly. So the first thing is making sure your staff is, really on the same page as both, the treasurer, the pro staff, and as well as the clubs. And from there, I think having a good, understanding of what's going on will serve to alleviate, kind of that first tier of problems. After that, you need to also make sure people are being held accountable for what they're doing. So if a club makes a mistake, rather than just like either, brush it off or say, oh, it's okay, whatever, make sure they understand what's going on and why it was wrong and maybe help them fix it. Obviously, there are extenuating circumstances at times. If something happened that was weird or crazy, it is the job of the staff to, we're here to work for you guys. So we want to make it so your events happen, so your trips happen, whatever. So kind of, being able to sort of go with the flow a little bit and also adapt to changing situations. I think there's maybe another question you had in there that I didn't answer because I forgot. Okay.
Any more questions? No more questions? Oh. Yeah, I'm really excited. I was like, oh. If there's no more questions, then thank you very much for coming out.
It's just what Matt said earlier, please come out and vote next week on April 14th, 15th, and 16th. I think that is the most we can do to ensure the democratic process for this election, so.